Now I'd like to leave the floor to Professor Raffaele Bruno, Director of the Infectious Disease Center in Pavia. And their two memories go back to what we experienced 2 years ago. But yesterday we said it is as if the pandemic no longer existed. It is as if we wanted to repress this memory. And Professor Bruno treated what was called patient one, the very first person who was diagnosed COVID-19 in Italy. Thank you very much to the organizers for their kind invitation. I must say that speaking after this parterre, I don't want to lower the quality of what I'll be covering with my speech. I was asked to speak about the value of memory with respect to COVID, the COVID pandemic in Italy, and I cannot but start. Shall I use the remote control, because I can't use it, actually it doesn't work. Can I have my first slide, please? This is the last one, sorry, apologies, but this is the last one. I'm not touching anything, you are controlling it. I mean, people in the control room. Can I go ahead myself with the slides? Okay, here we are. I cannot but start from this very date, February the 20th, 2020, and it was 20. I mean, it was 8 p.m. And this was the date when everything started. I'm a scientist, I shouldn't be looking at these things, but again, 2020 in the afternoon. At the time I was leaving the hospital, it was Friday, I was going to the gym. Any excuse was good not to go to the gym. I invested more on a gym subscription than anything else, because every single time I had a previous commitment and I couldn't go to the gym because I hate to go to the gym. I remember there was a virologist, a colleague who called me, and he told me, "Where are you? I'm leaving the hospital. Unfortunately, you must come back. Are you sitting down?" No, I believed that this was a personal tragedy that occurred, but he told me, "Now we are certain that there is an Italian patient who is positive to coronavirus." And I was deeply struck by this, because all what we believed to be far away from Italy, because we were stopping flights, actually was to be found at home in our hospitals. What happened then? The date of the beginning of COVID-19 epidemic in the Western world was between the 20th and 21st of February 2020. This was the date of the beginning of this tragedy. The clinical information that was worrisome to me is that this gentleman was a patient who had never visited China before and never had any contact with Chinese people before. So this made us suspect that actually the disease was spreading even without any contact with Chinese or China. So we started worrying. In the previous weeks, I must admit that we had meetings in hospital 1 month earlier, in my own hospital in Pavia, given my responsibility as the head of the infectious disease center. I had organized this meeting to plan this event. And I'll be showing you a few pictures, because this is my memory of the event and how everything happened. This is a colleague who just retired, the head of the ICU, February 21st at 2:20 was going to fetch Mattia Maestri, the first patient who was diagnosed COVID-19 in the Western world, a very strong man, a sportsman, who came to us in critical conditions, very critical conditions. I work at the hospital of Pavia. I'm very proud of this because this is a hospital I love, where I was trained. Also, I moved elsewhere in the world for my training, but I was proud that evening, that night, that we had 5 ICU beds to welcome these patients. We are ready, 5 beds. This is ridiculous now, and we were very proud. We have 5 beds in the ICU. You can send any patient to us. Then you all know what happened, unfortunately. And this was the situation we were living on a daily basis. You watched it from your TV set or reading the newspapers. I was in the front line like many other people. The first 80 days, I never left the hospital. Never left the hospital for 80 days in a row. I was brought dresses, clothes from my home. I mean, this was not just for me. This is what physicians should be doing if they want to do this job. And allow me an aside, a digression, that the heroes here, though, are nurses. These were the real heroes. People, though being underpaid and not used, take upon themselves an outstanding job, because physicians just give directions, and then the people actually meet a patient's needs, like I have to go to the toilet, I need to eat and drink, are nurses and not physicians. So these are the real heroes. So this was the situation on a daily basis. There was this long queues of ambulances ready to give us their patients. Another memory I preserve is the following. It was March 26. And I was sitting at a unit of crisis, as it was called. The collaborator called me, "Professor, you must come to the ward because there is a situation we cannot manage, unfortunately." So I rushed to the ward, and the situation was the following. We hospitalized a full family, 3 people, father, mother, young parents, and a 26-year-old girl. The parents were about 60. In a few hours, both the mother and the father had died. So we needed to communicate to this 26-year-old the piece of news. I'm not ashamed in saying this. I was very fearful. I didn't know what to do, but physicians should be capable of facing such situation. But needless to deny the fact that the emotional stress I was under, the situation which was so difficult to face, and speaking about this in front of Professor Crepe is embarrassing me, but anyway, our duty is to be counseling our patients, communicating bad news when we talk about cancer, whatever, but here the emotional involvement was very high. So I asked a psychiatrist, a colleague, to come and help me because I had to give this bad news to this girl. So we also had these kinds of situations to tackle at the time. So we are all feeling a burnout because of these situations. Also practical problems such as where should we put corpses. Before COVID, I don't know if you know how many people die on a daily basis in larger hospitals. I never wondered about that. On average, in hospitals with 1,000 beds, people who die are around 10. Now instead there were 25 people who died. So we didn't know where to put corpses. So I have all these memories impressed in my brain, and these memories inevitably changed my daily life, my daily habits, my person. This was the situation in hospitals at the time. And this not just large hospitals, general hospitals like mine, but in small hospitals where there were no tools available to face this situation. And then there were people, I would have done this, I would have done this, or taken these decisions, so on and so forth. I mean, to get your hands dirty is something completely different. To be in the trenches is completely different than watching from a TV set. Like all my colleagues, I really felt like being a 19th century physician, because now being treated in Pavia, Cosenza, Bologna, Novate is exactly the same thing, because now we adopt protocols. Modern medicine is evidence-based medicine. There are personal skills. There might be physicians who are better than others, but the treatment that you receive in Pavia, you also receive in a mass general hospital in Boston, because protocols are the same. Here instead we had no literature. The only possible literature was the one coming from China, which was not always truthful, which was not always practical. Suffice to think that the first data were on a drug that we abandoned many years for the treatment of HIV. We just used it for 1 week and we understood that the situation was worsening with this drug. What do I mean to say? That as it happened in the 19th century, you see that nothing changed, because we had to cover like when plague was spreading. But the learning curve was together with patients, because we knew nothing about this disease.
Rafforzare quello che sto
And to give evidence to what I'm saying, I'd like to show you this report. This is a report that the ICU physicians asked from us. This is a typical form at 2:15 for specific patient. Acute respiratory failure, the following treatment is advised. This is a long list of drugs. And if you consider that this patient was administered all these drugs, besides all those the ICU, then you can understand that now we just use 1 or 2 drugs to treat COVID-19. So strides were made, and the learning curve again was very important, very significant. But this took time. So at a certain point, what happened? It happened that memory became key. Pavia University General Hospitals, which is very prestigious. At a certain point, Pavia was at the center of the world. I was live on CNN, on the BBC. Why so? Because patient 1 had become a symbol across the world. He was a symbol because if he died, we would have been doomed. If he were treated, then we would be saved. So the value of memory. Here I list, and I want to boast about this. Anyway, all the revenues were given to a charity. So anyway, these were notes that I jotted down while having this experience, and all these notes and thoughts that I'd like to read tell us that the sacrifice of physicians and nurses that fought in the front line will be meaningful if you give value to memory, the memories of people who lived this pandemic. 570 physicians died because in the field or because they got sick with COVID. 250 were the nurses who died. So health workers paid a huge toll to this pandemic. And if we remember the commitment of those who fought even to the cost of their lives to snatch people from death, will be guaranteeing a more brilliant future to future generations. And memory today, but even tomorrow, will be the most powerful weapon to fight a new crisis. I don't want to be conveying bad news, but you should be aware of the fact that there is an American agency that was suspended from its activity for a few years, and this agency is responsible for monitoring the microorganisms that perform the so-called spillover. We are monitoring around 1,000 right now. This to say that in the near future, the spillover might happen again. This is what history teaches us. This is why we should be leveraging memory to learn what can happen in the future. And from any event that marks an individual's community's lives, we should be learning something. Every one of us, before and during the lockdown, experienced a new concept of the new normal. Things that were considered to be trivial, were taken for granted, were no longer so. And you know what it is. Go to the coffee house, hugging a person, a loved one. And I'd like to close my presentation by saying the following. During this experience I had that marked my life as a citizen, as a physician, as a healthcare worker, what I learned is the following. And this was clear to my mind also before. I don't want to sound trivial because we all have false needs. As soon as I get to the hospital, I forget about my false needs because there are people suffering. What I learned is that normalcy is a privilege. To live a normal life is a great privilege. So this we should be learning from the memory left by COVID-19 to all of us. Thank you very much for listening.
Grazie anche al professor Bruno. Anche qui un racconto.
So, thank you so much. Something that touches us all because of different lives and different. I never stopped working, and every day we were on TV with contributions also mentioned by Professor Bruno, and taking energy away from the army of physicians because we needed to tell something apart from inviting and hosting experts of any kind, not knowing the hell experienced by physicians. And before lunch break, we'll ask a question. We'll ask Professor Kerpé a question. Well, normalcy and the beauty of normalcy, then there's a collective action of removal of certain things.